episode 53 of Grace and Steele. I'm Kevin Steele. First of all, I'd like to say a word about our sponsors. This show is being brought to you by our generous listeners who responded to our Twitter plea for funds so we could continue to produce Grace and Steele. Truly, this one's for you because this episode wouldn't have happened without you. Thank you. The fundraising continues as the need is still great. So if you enjoy what we do and have enjoyed it over the last year that we've been podcasting, and you would like to help out, please go to our website, twokevins.com, and hit the donate button to send some much-needed cash. Thanking you in advance. Now, our guest this week is the pseudo-anonymous shitlord who goes by the Twitter handle Jay Fivekiller, J5 to his friends, and who posts at the website My Posting Career under the name Cinco Jotas. Mr. Fivekiller has described himself and his fellow trolls as, quote, Conservadad Gone Bad, unquote. He spoke with my co-host, Kevin Michael Grace, last Friday about his journey of self-discovery, a long, winding road at the end of which he became an early adopter of shit-lordism, a story we are certain you will all find simply deplorable.
So as is customary, my first question, how did you find yourself becoming a right-wing shitlord?
Yeah, how did I find myself becoming a nut, as my wife says? Well, I was, I think the story starts probably in the late 80s when I found myself being a sort of traditional bog standard conservative. I think I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh's early as 1989 out in California, where I'm from. And after that, it was sort of, standard conservative, cuck-servative, Dems are the real racist, all of that nonsense. Sometime around the mid-2000s, I think I kind of began the evolution towards shitlordism. I know that in the standards of shitlordism, I'm one of the oldest adopters, I guess. I was one of the very first registrants on My Posting Career, 2009. And that's where I sort of found myself as one of the old men of the alt-right.
So, 2009, let's see, I started reading NPC about 2010.
Wow.
I guess I've been lurking there since then.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think my registration numbers are in the double digits. In fact, I know it's in the double digits, like a 60s, I think, or 50s. But so, and that was completely by accident. It was, I was reading Sailor and Udolpho, Pleasure Man left a comment there. And next thing you know, I'm reading the Udolpho blog and nodding my head along. And I registered at MPC shortly after that.
Pleasure Man, or Udolpho, the founder of MPC, he seems to be very down on Steve Saylor these days. Why do you think that is?
I think he thinks Saylor's probably not gone far enough, that he's too timid. I actually have a pretty good appreciation for Saylor. I'm closer to him in age. I'm in my mid-50s. Saylor's only, I think, 2 or 3, 4 years older than I am. We're both Californians. I think Saylor's probably pretty shocked to see what's happened to America, happened to California. He was in the 70s. He grew up in, one of the great good spots of the world, the San Fernando Valley. And over the past 40 years, it's just turned to complete shit. And so I think Saylor is, he's a true baby boomer. And I think that transition just hasn't really happened all the way for him. He still probably craves a little more respectability. I think he wants to be taken seriously by the people that we probably wouldn't want to be taken seriously by. And I think that's probably why Pleasure Man's down on him. As I say, I think I have a pretty good appreciation for him. I think I kind of know where Steve Saylor's coming from. But I think that ultimately, he's just not going far enough.
Well, a few years ago, I wrote a review of David Mamet's political book.
Oh, yeah.
And I made the same sort of complaints, really. After I had reread what I'd written, I don't know, about a month after I'd finished it, I realized that I'd made a serious error because what I was criticizing Mamet for was not writing the book I wanted him to write.
Right.
In the sense that all of these things that Mamet was talking about, yeah, we know all this stuff. We take this for granted, right?
Right.
But Mamet wasn't writing this book for me. Mamet was writing this book for these people who were thinking, there's this thing out there called conservatism, and all my life I've been told that this is where America's Nazis live, and so maybe that's not true.
Right.
And so, Mamet was just sort of trying to help them along,
Yeah.
giving them a beginner's guide. I feel very grateful to Saylor, to Steve. I know him a little bit, not all that well. It's just that he helped me bring together my own thinking.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Saylor performed a function. I think he brought a lot of conservadads to the alt-right or to the right position. I think that he's kind of the entryway drug. And I as I said, I feel pretty solid about Steve being a pretty good guy. I have a good understanding of where he's coming from. He hasn't gone as far as we have. He hasn't gone as far as many of us have, but that's just the way it is. So speaking of Mamet, I remember reading all those Pajama Medias things in the mid-2000s, and remember when Mamet came out as sort of conservative and sort of the angst on the left about that, and then essentially kind of writing Mamet out of Broadway at that point. Luckily his plays are so good that they get performed still, but he seems to have been anathemized by a lot of people on the left there. And by our standards now, he's not gone far enough. He's sort of a kosher conservative.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know where he is these days. He does seem to have not done very much in the last few years, apart from the Phil Spector biopic that he wrote. Let's go back to California.
Yeah, sure.
I grew up in British Columbia, and I grew up in Vancouver. And you hear people talking about living in Vancouver. Oh, it's like when I lived in San Diego. People actually wear T-shirts that say "Another Day in Paradise." Well, when I was growing up in Vancouver in the 60s and 70s, this wasn't paradise. It's just a place where people lived. And then I found out, it seemed to me, that the conservative movement was all about money, sucking up to money. Hey, you're from here? And you want to stay here, and you don't have enough money, well, don't expect any sympathy from us. You should have picked richer parents. And I wonder if you got that same sense living in California.
Well, I lived in sort of the Central Valley. I'm kind of an Okie kid. My grandparents came to California in the 40s, and so I got a very different sense. I mean, it's the sort of Tom-Joed, hard-nosed, Southern and Southwestern type. Scots-Irish, that crew. And so my California was not the LA California. It was Northern California with hippies and cowboys, hippies and farmers. That's what I had. And so it wasn't really the same thing. I will say that, in growing up in the 70s, that there weren't a lot of Mexicans around. It was, my high school had one sort of Mexican who didn't speak very good English. The rest of the Mexicans we had were the second generation of the ones who came in the 40s and 50s and were completely assimilated. We had people named Guzman who played football. And, it was one of those sorts of places where everybody played football. My best friend says we're from a small West Texas town in California, so it's a kind of a different thing. And yet at the same time, there was a sense that California was a kind of special place. The higher education was dirt cheap. My first year in college, it was $110 for the whole semester, and at a good state university in California. And so it's kind of downhill from there.
Well, no, I mean, I had a similar experience. I mean, there were a lot of Chinese people at the high school I graduated from. But when they were in the schoolyard, when you saw them, they all spoke English because they weren't going to be speaking Chinese. And when I'm in Vancouver these days, and I see Chinese people, they're all speaking Chinese. There's no, I mean, it's an Asian city now. It's theirs.
Yeah.
They've taken it over, and if you don't like it, well, you can leave, as I did, and so many others continue to.
Yeah, that's been the most shocking thing. I mean, my town's only about 50%. My hometown's only about 50% Mexican now, or Hispanic, and so by the standards of California, it's not in worse shape. I mean, if you were head south of Fresno, there are all these old Okie towns, Okie and old California towns that are completely swamped now. Victor Davis Hanson, writes about that some, about just being overrun by, Mexicans. So it's not as bad in my hometown. There are towns around us where it's worse, but you go back and no one takes football seriously anymore, which is probably for the best. And soccer is a much bigger thing. The main street has been completely converted. These crappy little Mexican shops selling crappy little Mexican things, and that's California now. Even the north, where the holdout of whites, there's not too many places left where that's true.
Well, if you look at California, and Jerry Brown, who I was led to believe by people who know about these things is an intelligent man. California's been swamped by low IQ people with little or no education who contribute almost nothing in terms of taxation and are simply stealing all the resources regarding schooling, regarding hospitals, jails, etc. The state is also running out of water, and yet, of course, we need more and more and more people. You live in the place. Why has there not been a massive, overwhelming rebellion against this idiocy?
Well, I think the shift happened so rapidly is part of it. I think that the areas that vote liberal in the Bay Area are insulated from a lot of it. I remember growing up, you'd go into San Francisco and the hippies were there and plenty of Chinese people, plenty of Asians. But down south of San Francisco on the peninsula, there were still spots that were quite livable. Parts of Berkeley were quite livable. Around the Bay, there were spots where you could still buy a house for not much money. And then it just all seemed to start off in the 80s and ramp up. And as we went through the 80s, prices went, and the sensible people were displaced, mostly by liberals. And at that point, the people who could vote for the right seemed to stop about the late 80s, the 90s. I guess Pete Wilson was the last one. And after that, it was the deluge. It was, just opened the floodgates, and the massive number of Mexicans who came in just could not be overcome. So I think that's what happened. It was just so fast. It happened within a 20-year period, really, that final deluge.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have. I guess the people who live in California don't really know anything about Mexico, do they?
They don't. If they do, they've been to Ensenada or they've been down to the tourist area, and they're not concerned with it. And the whites who've managed to hang on, for the most part, have segregated themselves on the west side of LA or into the enclaves in the Bay Area, or they've been willfully trying to ignore it because they don't really associate with Mexicans beyond the few who are sort of approved, or the lawn care guy, or every restaurant employee who's not in a restaurant that's a high-end one. It's sort of all pervasive. You really just can't avoid it.
If you look at the history of Mexico since its independence from Spain almost 200 years ago, you see periods of dictatorship alternating with periods of chaos. And I wonder why these white idiots in California don't realize that this is now their future.
Yeah, I've lived in Latin America. I've lived in South America. And that's what you have to look forward to. I mean, the whites in South America are pretty well insulated from the people lower down. And that relationship between the Spanish and the others who are white, living on top of a majority of people who are brown. And I think that's the future. The future is the reality of California right now. I oftentimes point out, speaking of, Mexican and California history, when California was admitted to the state, well, even before California was admitted during the gold rush, there were less than 5,000 Mexicans in California. It was virtually uninhabited. It was a little strip along the coast from just north of San Francisco to San Diego. No one lived in the interior. In fact, the interior was being settled by Anglos, by people from the East who took Mexican land grants. That's what happened on the eve. So it was really, very few Mexicans in California. And by 1850, the number of Americans was 10 to 1 to Mexicans. So every time some Mexican says you stole California from them, so I'm like, well, yeah, you guys weren't even using it. You had no one there.
Well, you see the same thing in Texas.
Yeah.
You see the newcomers, the white people coming there, and it didn't take very many of them before they were sufficient to say, okay, this is our place now.
The Daily Shoah guys, whites have agency. If the history proves anything, that a small band of whites can do a great deal of mischief without much provocation. And that's kind of my hope for the future, that if things get bad enough, well, I'm hoping actually if Trump wins, that we don't have to worry about that we can begin the process sort of politically of rolling some of this But if not, there's a chance to go. I always say that if we get secession and the United States breaks up, I'm launching a filibuster to take California back. Me and the ghost of William Walker are heading out there with some surplus military equipment and reconquering the state.
Have you seen Mike Judge's show Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I've seen a couple episodes. They're pretty funny.
I thought it's probably my favorite show right now. This character, Erlich Bachman.
Yeah.
And I may have the joke backwards, that at one point, one of the episodes, he has to explain to this Chinese fellow who's living in his house that in California, just how objectionable cigarette smoking is considered. And then later on, he explains, and again, I may have this backwards, that, okay, now you're talking about Christianity, and in Northern California, Christianity is almost as objectionable as cigarette smoking. In fact, it may be the other way around. The cigarette smoking may, in fact, be almost as objectionable as, as Christianity. But I bring this up because there seems to be this willingness for Californians, or at least the ones that are still involved in making money, to make themselves into Eloy. As in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Not to worry about the Morlocks. The Morlocks are our friends, and we love the Morlocks too. And, when it's election day, we have, us and the Morlocks, we have an alliance. It's not like they'd ever turn on us, given how desperately weak and feeble we are, and how we love to advertise how weak and feeble we are.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, the experience of Latin America is that they don't, or when they do, they're ineffectual. So, I mean, I think that they're probably right in some respects, that the Eloy of California, those whites, those cosmopolitan whites along the coast, probably are correct, that if you keep going down this demographic road, you'll end up with, 90% minority population ruled over by 10%, and there's just enough connection that it'll prevent the sort of backlash you might imagine would happen. The thing about the Hispanics is that they're pretty quiescent. It takes a lot to get those peones, Mexican peones, up in arms. For all their history of rebellion, it seems pretty ineffectual. It doesn't take much to buy them off, I would think. Maybe I'm wrong. I just
the thing that I'm expecting to start in California real soon now is end of civilizational stuff. Where bridges and such start collapsing, because the means of perpetuating civilization is dying. I'll give you an example. When I lived in California just over 20 years ago, I was shocked to find out about the number of unregistered vehicles on the roads.
Right.
Uninsured and unregistered vehicles. And I asked someone about this, and he explained to me that in California, driving was considered a human right, perhaps the most important human right. And it wasn't really the done thing simply to take cars off the road and to punish people because his cars were neither registered nor insured. And I said, well, you understand, the amount of money that's being spent in insurance claims and, but this is California, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, I suppose people have forgotten this. The reason why insurance was made mandatory in the first place, because you started to have all of these people ruined by claims.
Right.
Because, no, we're going to look for the deepest pockets, and you're the deepest pockets, and you're going to have to pay. Just when I saw a situation like that, so we've given up on enforcing the laws regarding insurance and registration. I mean, what's next? What other laws? I mean, like health laws, are they being enforced?
No, I mean,
California?
Yeah. I mean, that's clear. The Los Angeles cracked down on the devil dog people, the people who make the bacon-wrapped hot dog a few years back, and there was great wailing because these were completely unlicensed food vendors selling, things that were making people sick. But they were Mexican, and so it was okay that they were allowed in these shopping cart grills, allowed to kind of sell these hot dogs. It's pretty much that anarcho-tyranny. I'll give you a fact about Los Angeles. Over 50% now of auto accidents in Los Angeles County are hit and run. And the thinking is that these are mostly illegals or recent immigrants who are, hitting your car and splitting. but they're not going to hang around for the cops or for the insurance exchange. So, yeah, I mean, it's really clear that things are becoming quite lawless. Of course, if I were to take my hot dog card and go down by Dodger Stadium and try to sell a hot dog, I'd be arrested that day. But, the Mexican vendors are allowed to get away with it. That's Sam Francis's definition of anarcho-tyranny. Tyranny at the top and anarchism at the bottom.
Oh, sure. Sam Francis, tremendous writer, tremendous thinker, and far ahead of his time, no question about that. I'm interested in this cognitive dissonance because that the very same people who look at the whole taco truck or the shopping cart, food vendors, are the very same people that in their own homes, they've got the Lysol products scrubbing every single germ off every surface. They're obsessed with this kind of thing, right? And also that Mexican Americans have this particular affinity for drunk driving. And when I mean drunk driving, I don't mean a point or two above the limit. I mean coming in at 0.27, where you kind of have to think it's really impressive that this person managed to, 1, get to the car, 2, get into the car, 3, start the car, and 4, actually have the car move down a road, right?
Oh, no, you're exactly right. My favorite, we like to troll on Twitter occasionally. I like to troll with my favorite Google search. If you ever want to upset people of Hispanic descent, you just type in the Google phrase into Google News, attempted abduction Hispanic man. And you'll find out that Hispanic men love to abduct teenagers, love to try to abduct preteens. Most of this isn't a stranger abduction. Most of this are some peone from the backwoods of, Chiapas, who's come up to, Rockford, Illinois. And there he's got some Mexican family living near him with a 12-year-old daughter who he's paying attention to. And so he tries to snatch her one day after school. And off you go. And if you look at that, every time you do that search, you'll turn up 5, 6, 7 fairly recent, within the last month, 6 weeks, examples of this phenomenon. Just all these attempted kidnappings where the perpetrator is identified as a Hispanic male. And so, you're talking about sort of the bad part of Mexican culture. We get taco trucks, right, on every corner, but we also get drunk driving deaths and attempted abductions.
Well, I mentioned the drunk driving because to white liberals, driving while impaired, or perhaps driving while drinking at all, is about the worst crime there is. It's about the worst crime there is, and yet this cognitive dissonance. Well, if there's a particular group that seems especially fond of this, maybe they're the people we don't want in the Golden State. Nope. We don't want to get down to cases like that.
Well, you're engaging in crime thing. Anytime you question the virtue of a minority as a group, it's crime thing, and you've got to be suppressed. So I think a lot of people, they may have that moment of cognitive dissonance, but it's pushed down. It's that Orwellian response that says, tamp it down. I think you would see more of it. I think you would see it, the normal human response to say, as a group, these people need to be expelled or at least reined in or civilized or whatever. And maybe with Trump, I think with Trump, you're seeing perhaps a little bit of it being freed. That, whites are now saying, hey, wait a second, what the hell is going on here?
Well, we'll get to Trump in a minute, but the point I was getting to was that, Pete Wilson, he wrecked everything, right? Because Pete Wilson didn't see the future. Pete Wilson was so stupid he didn't want California inundated by people who were never going to vote for the Republican Party, and how that argument keeps being made, and people who are supposedly smart keep nodding their head. I think these people who are supposedly smart are really stupid because, of course, you don't want where you live taken over by people who are never going to vote for your party. But I was wondering that since, Pete Wilson is the big villain of California politics, that in the recent past, in terms of real talk on race, that people in California, white people, no, keep it down. We don't want to blow it. If we get the right candidate who's not a woman and who didn't fail in business at the highest level, that, maybe we'll win a big office here in California. But now that California's lost, I'm wondering whether there's more people willing to throw caution to the winds and say, since it doesn't matter anymore, we're going to say exactly what we think.
I would hope, but I don't see a lot of evidence of it. I mean, absent the Trump phenomenon. I just haven't. My best friend is still there, and we're still in California, and he just doesn't real talk at all in that particular way. And he's a pretty right-wing guy. I wouldn't exactly call him a conservative, but I think at the same time he just won't touch that third rail. I think in California the demographics are so far against us that you just don't go there.
Well, one last question
Sure.
on this particular subject. How do people in California who don't have a lot of money deal with the ridiculousness of getting a medical bill for a routine procedure and then finding out, oh no, is this kind of like the end for me now?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you my own story. My own story from California was that the company I work for had us on an HMO. And so I got very sick when I was there. And I called up the doctor's office, where we're supposed to go. And I explained to them that half the time I felt like I was going to faint, and the other half I thought that I was going to vomit. And then I was not in the habit of exaggerating things, and this was, really serious, so I needed to see the doctor now. They said, no, that's not possible. We're all booked up. Well, when can I see the doctor? 2 days. I said, that's not going to work for me. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with me, but this seems to be really serious, and I can't work, and I can't do anything, and I'm really, really sick and in a lot of pain. And so the woman says, well, you can go to the emergency ward. Ah, the emergency ward. Okay. So I go to the emergency ward of the hospital, and they do a couple of tests on me. And it turns out that I had prostatitis, which is an infection of the prostate gland. And so, they give me some medicine for this. And then, like a couple of weeks later, I get a bill in the mail, and I open it up, and it says I owe $7,000
Wow.
for having spent a couple of hours walking around in one of those stupid gowns, and from them taking, a couple of samples from me. And I didn't pay that bill. I mean, I left the United States shortly thereafter, but I mean, it's routine in California for people to be charged preposterous amounts of money when their wives have babies or whatever. And everybody knows that the reason that the bills are so high is because you're paying for all those people who are never going to pay anything towards their medical costs. How do the liberals in Canada or in California who aren't rich deal with that?
Oh, I have no idea. I have good insurance, so I don't really know that answer to that. I'm up in Northern California too, so I'm not, down in the thick of it. I spend some time in LA every year, but it's a whole different world. The Southern California is just, I mean, it's depressing when you go down there. At least in rural Northern California, things are, you go to the doctor sees you, fairly promptly. So I think in that respect, I'm probably not the best informant for you. But at the same time, man, I think things are, as you say, things are dysfunctional. It's not like it used to be. And I'm not saying that like some cranky old man,
Well, aren't they spending
lamenting.
several zillion dollars building a high-speed railway to nowhere?
Yeah, Hanford. It goes to Hanford, which is, if you've been to Hanford, it's like, I don't even know, Kamloops or something. I think there's actually people in Kamloops. Yeah, it's the most ridiculous idea. But this is Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeam. But I'm still reeling from the fact that he was reelected after having been gone for 30 years. He's an 80-year-old man. And that's kind of...
All of the Democrats in California are very old.
They're all 80, yeah. They have this sort of tri-racial Kamala Harris thing now, Asian, black, and whatever else. And I guess she's the coming thing. And I don't know. I don't
know. Are Barbara Boxer and the other one, I mean, they're going to live forever,
they're
aren't
both
they?
in their 80s. I think Feinstein's in her 80s and Boxer must be in his late 70s or something now. Two Jewish senators. Yeah, it's just disturbing. It's just, and California was, when I was growing up, it was a pretty right-wing place. It was a Republican stronghold, California.
Oh, Orange County was the stronghold of the John Birch Society.
Oh yeah, and Northern California was just as shitlordy as you can get. It was all people from old farmers, fifth generation California farmers, and Okies and Arkies who wound up there and then adopted the same attitude. It was a pretty right wing place. There's a great article, I think it's by Keith Windshuttle, about how wrong Steinbeck was about the Okies. The Okies were not some nascent communist group. The thing about the Okies is that they were hardcore right wingers. They may have felt some sort of animus towards the bosses, but that was Scots-Irish animus. That wasn't some communist fellow feeling. And Steinbeck put the whole attitude on them of being, wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, it's the biggest bunch of bullshit ever. The Central Valley was hardcore right wing. You actually get a sense of, if you ever read James Crumley's novel, The Last Good Kiss, you get a real sense of what those Okies were like in that fantastic opening scene. A bunch of tough characters.
Well, I read Steinbeck when I was young, and it was pretty clear to me from the beginning that he was above all a sentimentalist.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at his career from starting out pretty much as a communist, and then ending his life as a staunch supporter of LBJ and the war in Vietnam, and railing at what's wrong with these kids, that we've got to defeat communism in Asia.
Yeah, Steinbeck's a fraud. I mean, I think he's, technically, some of the lines are fantastic, and East of Eden has something to it, but, The Grapes of Wrath is just a bunch of hokum.
So I wanted to ask you about Twitter. How long have you been on Twitter?
I've been on Twitter now about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. I think we all a lot of us MPC people made the migration. Must have been around 2014, I think, in the spring of 2014.
Were you banned from Twitter at one point?
I have never been. I was just saying that today. I've never been banned from Twitter. It's kind of a shame that I've never been banned from Twitter. I thought I was pretty aggressive and, nasty, but apparently not aggressive enough. I'm still kind of trying to figure out why I've never been banned.
Well, maybe it's a question of, do you go after feminists?
I originally went after feminists. I had been thrown down with this Sui Park, this Korean SJW.
I know who she is.
Yeah.
She's very, very silly. She was holding up that sign with that gormless expression on her face, and it was something like, "Hey, people older and more successful, commit suicide because I need a job."
Yeah. She's a fraud. I think that, it's a Korean woman who's an SJW. Anytime you see one of those, they're obviously a fraud. The Asians are not. If they do SJW stuff, it's all for advantage. Unless they're just mentally
It's been pointed out there seems to be an awful lot of Korean SJWs in the United States.
Yeah, there's some advantage in it, and I think they're playing the angles. That's usually what you find with a lot of the Asians, that they're pretty much playing the angles and something like that. It's not really true belief.
Because I just remember being a kid again and reading Ian Fleming and taking away from this the idea that of all the Asian people, the Koreans were the ones that you very much did not want to mess with.
Yeah, Koreans are tough. I mean, they're like somebody's called them the Irish of Asia, these hardcore sort of tough characters who are not going to stand. They're not, the Irish have redeeming qualities. I think the Koreans have a few redeeming qualities. But I guess they're Christian. That's the good thing about the Koreans. They tend to be pretty serious about their Christianity. But otherwise, I'm not a giant fan of Koreans.
So let's get to Trump here. At MPC, for several years, the idea was that, at some point in the future, a man would arrive, perhaps on horseback, perhaps not. And, God knows how horrifying the United States, quotidian life would be in the United States at that point, whether it would be close to being post-apocalyptic. And then that didn't turn out to be the case. What happened is that in 2015, a well-known orange-faced TV billionaire decided to run for president. Everything changed overnight. I mean, how shocked were you?
That's like the craziest. My claim to fame is I laid out the entire Trump campaign platform in February of 2014. If you look on MPC for a post called My Populism Career, I laid out what I thought would be the perfect populist candidate platform, and it was pretty much down the line, every point, Trump's campaign platform. I'm like completely shocked that I actually picked something right. Usually I'm dead wrong about politics, but in this case, my claim to fame is literally I laid out the Trump campaign platform as populist. Immigration, guns, work, going after big business, trade restrictions, the whole 9 yards. I had no idea in 2014 that anyone would do this. In fact, in 2014, I think I prefaced that post by saying, I don't see any way out of this. I have no desire to participate in, electoral politics. But if, as a last resort, you wanted to save America, this might be how you would do it. On the one hand, I kind of hoped someone would do that, but I really had no idea. In fact, I think the general trend, as you say, on MPC in 2014 was, we just got to kind of maintain our sanity as this thing spirals down.
Well, no, I mean, if you go back to 2008 with John McCain, my own reaction was, oh, geez, this guy? And, of course, he ran exactly the campaign that you'd expect, and he lost. And then afterwards, we were told, oh, he was too extreme.
Right.
And then, 2012, Mitt Romney, oh, geez, this guy? And he ran exactly the kind of campaign that you thought that he would, and he lost. And we were told afterwards, well, that's because he was too extreme. And just this feeling that we were caught in a death spiral.
Right.
It was just each candidate would be more feeble than the last, and then everyone would be expected to apologize for supporting the candidate they'd been told that they must support because he was the moderate one.
Well, I think that's true. But I think at MPC, I mean, the sentiment was we had just pretty much given up on electoral politics. I don't think there was any. I think the general thinking there, now if I can characterize it, was just that this is the end. That whatever's going to come, there'll be some breakup of America. There'll be a firestorm of some sort, and you just hope that you and your kids, your family, and your friends make it to the other side, so that you can begin the process of making something meaningful out of the rubble. I honestly don't think I had any idea or any hope that politics could change what was happening. It just did not seem, for the reason you cited. The Republicans just seemed intent on putting up these conservatives, and that was the end.
I'm fascinated by the question, the chicken and egg question regarding Trump, because my own view, which was encapsulated by this Twitter fellow who calls himself Fame's Blonde.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you've seen him.
Yeah.
The idea is that Trump didn't invent us, the alt-right. We invented him. That, as I expressed it on this podcast some months ago, that Trump hasn't persuaded anyone, or he's persuaded few people. Trump has said things, and then people have heard them, and they said, hey, this Trump guy is saying what we believe.
Right.
And he's the only one. He's the first one, in fact. Because I've been saying for a decade, if you were a lower middle class or lower class white, particularly a white male in the United States, and I came to this conclusion after the 2004 election, when it was Bush running against Kerry, because the attitude of both Bush and Kerry towards lower and lower middle class white people was hurry up and die.
Right.
Because we hate you and everything that you stand for. And I thought, why on earth would any of these people get involved in the political process? And then it occurred to me, this is opening up this enormous opportunity if someone shows up and says, hey, you people, the ones that all the respectable people hate, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens with that.
Yeah,
let's see what, and this is what Trump did.
In hindsight, I think that's exactly right. But at the same time, I mean, from the perspective of 2014, after Romney and Romney, the most anodyne, seemingly the most centrist sort of Republican, failed to get elected against a very weak president who should have lost. And the Republicans are colluding with this particular, demographic swamping of America. I just think most people, at MPC had sort of given up on electoral politics. I think that local electoral politics, what we're talking about, take charge of your school board or, your city council. I don't think anyone thought that we could ever again, reverse the demographics, that what was coming was going to be a cataclysm, a breakup of America, a downscaling, the scale being the big topic at MPC. So, yeah, in hindsight, it's very clear that once Trump started saying things, that here was a giant market opening that people responded to, and that he was able to break through that without the support or with the active opposition of, the Republicans and the Democrats both is pretty remarkable.
Are you surprised that the media, the mainstream media, is in the tank for Hillary as much as they are?
Yes, as much as they are, yes. I'm not surprised that in general they're in the tank for her. I'm not surprised that they would break to the left, but just the sort of complete willingness to lie.
I'll give you an example. That this question of Hillary's health and this question of the fit or whatever it was that she had shortly before the Democratic convention. And there was a column in the Globe and Mail, so it's Canadian, but it's effectively the same thing in terms of the MSN, where, oh no, this Hillary's health thing is completely ridiculous. And the reporter, Lisa Lehrer, the AP reporter, who was there, and I'm thinking, hey, lady, you've seen the video, right, of Lisa Lehrer's reaction?
Right.
You ever see one of those cartoons growing up when someone sees a ghost? It was like that. You thought that she was going to come out of her body. She was so shocked. The fact that afterwards she says, oh, no, we know that she was just playing a role there. No, sorry. No, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah. Well, the Lehrer name deserves a set of parentheses around it. Yeah, I've just been kind of really, really, I suppose, how far they've gone with it has really shocked me. It's just they've sold every bit of credibility they've had. And anytime one breaks from that sort of lockstep, everything's cool with Hillary, I'm much more shocked that they would do so now. It's just, it's so overt and so complete. So, yeah, I guess I would have to say I've been quite shocked by it.
Well, the strange thing that's happened in the last few days, in that it would appear that there are indications that the Hillary campaign is turning on the media. And I'm thinking they really can't be that stupid, can they? Because when the next president of the United States, or supposed to be the next president of the United States, has a coughing fit for 4.5 minutes at a big Labor Day rally, and then we better trot the old lady again to let everyone know, well, she's still alive, right? And then blah, 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 Putin. Oh, my God, here she is at it again. Sorry, it's over, right? So I guess the media kind of has to deal with it, right? And the reaction of the Hillary people was, how dare you? How dare you?
People don't know that Hillary's campaign manager, this Robbie Mook guy's gay. This guy is so far in the bubble that I think he just does not understand that there's any. I really believe that whole staff is completely in the Hillary bubble. They have no conception of what ordinary people think. They view every sort of criticism as betrayal or, treason. It's just they're really dumb. They're not the brightest bunch. And the fact that they've got this gay guy running things, and he's turned out to be pretty inept. They outspent Trump by $100 million, it said today, on ads. And what do they get for it? Pretty much almost dead even in the polls.
I was looking at Hillary's Twitter feed last night, and most of it is like Zen koans. I was really shocked that I joked that did she read a lot of Kahlil Gibran when back in the hippie days? Because that's the level of it. It's but this Mook fellow, it's interesting that when they brought out the Bros for Hillary, and you saw the pics the same as I did, and I thought this is not what I would characterize to be a bro. Because these guys are such flamers that are these the only men that you could find?
Well, that's
support Hillary.
That's my trolling kill shot. That's the troll that brings them all out to attack me. I just anytime somebody treats something back, you lay the bait out, you lay out the outrageous line, and then people respond to it. And the thing that gets them going is my troll is only cat ladies, homos, Jews, people of color, and jihadi dads support Hillary. No straight white men allowed. And that just sets them off because it's so patently true. Of all the trolling I've done over the months here, the number of straight white dudes who are pro-Hillary, I could probably count them on one hand, who aren't Jewish, who aren't whatever, probably 4 or 5.
You saw Paul Krugman was complaining recently that why aren't we seeing all the articles about the enthusiasm for Hillary? And I thought, what does this guy talk like? It's like, in the Hamptons,
right.
This summer in the Hamptons, that's all anyone talked about was Hillary and how much everyone loves her and how she's going to inaugurate a new golden age for America.
Yeah, well, Krugman's Jewish, so he lives on the Upper West Side. He has a black wife. He goes to a lot of science fiction conventions. He's like Pauline Kael, after Nixon wins, Pauline Kael famously says, "How can Nixon win?" And I know no one who voted for him. That's exactly what Krugman is. He's in this Upper West Side Jewish bubble.
Doesn't he live in a house that's visible from space?
Oh, is that Krugman or is that Friedman? Friedman lives in a gigantic house. He's married to some billionaire's daughter. I thought Krugman, does he live in Princeton, out in Princeton, or does he live in the Upper West Side?
No, I'm not sure.
All I know about Krugman is he seems to have a black wife, and he's a big, attender of science fiction conventions. So you'll see pictures of him occasionally.
There was a story in the Hill today. That hilarious stuff. That it's time for Hillary Clinton to open up, to show her funny, her human side, the side that everyone loves. I'm thinking, I followed Hillary for a quarter of a century, sometimes pretty closely,
Right.
And, I hear that there are a lot of people out there who think that Joe Biden's a hell of a guy. And, of course, famously, there's a lot of people out there who think that Bill Clinton's a hell of a guy, that, he's funny, he's smart, great conversationalist and whatever. I have never heard anyone carry on about Hillary in that regard.
The best comment that in her favor is that she's got a really cutting sense of sardonic humor, and that's about it, and that she can drink really well. Otherwise, you just imagine Hillary opening herself up and like a scene from Alien, the chest peels back and there's some awful, hideous creature inside squealing at you. That's about the best I can imagine.
Well, what is vastly amusing to me is the people who are the strongest for Hillary are the very same people who see ill health as a moral failing.
Right.
So this disgusting business with her, this talking about Alien, this sputum from her mouth being spat back into a glass.
No, horrible stuff.
No, but okay, I wanted to mention this fact to you. Clinton has had the most difficulty connecting with white working class voters. A nationwide CNN ORC poll released Tuesday showed Trump beating Clinton among white voters without college degrees 66% to 23%.
Wow.
Now note, this says white voters without college degrees. It does not say white male voters without college degrees, which indicates that a majority of female white voters without college degrees have to support Trump as well.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't heard that one. That's a good one.
Well, no, I mean, when you look at this, okay, so if whites are approximately 2/3 of the American population, and whites without college degrees would be about half or more of the American population. So we're looking at 1/3 of the nation right there. And in that 1/3, Trump is beating Hillary 66 to 23%. This assumption that Hillary is, it's such a tight race, and, the question of whether maybe Trump could squeak by. I'm not seeing where Hillary's voters are coming from. Are you seeing where her voters are coming from?
No, I'm not. And in fact, I have a really great bet with an old friend of mine who's a an academic, and it's 3-1. I made the bet in January, 3-1 odds on Trump. I thought Trump was going to win, and I feel pretty confident that that's still the case. I may have been a little black-pilled when she got to double digits right after the convention, but as soon as he's got to Labor Day and went to Mexico, that just turned right around. And again, I'm like you. I don't see where her votes are coming from. I see these pictures of her, quote, rallies, and they look like they could be held in a club car. It's just not there.
Well, her campaign, I don't know whether you saw the raw video of her Labor Day appearance.
No, I haven't.
Well, it was on NPC. So it begins in media res with some guy who was supposed to be black, I guess. He didn't look very black. And he's ranting at the crowd like Hitler. It was really embarrassing. Oh, Trump has the money, but we have the people. Wait a minute. Trump is the one with the money? No, I think you got that backwards. So then they bring out the head of the AFL-CIO. And he talks about how unions are making a big comeback. And I'm thinking, well, does this clown think that everyone is going to end up working for government? Because that's the only way you're going to increase union membership in today's America. And then, before Kane comes out, the audience is left with nothing happening on the stage for about 30 or 40 minutes while they replay on a loop the old ABC news theme music. You remember that? Ba, 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 ba.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, were they electroshocking Hillary into sentience there for 3/4 of an hour, and that's why nothing was happening on stage?
Yeah. Well,
because you see Tim Kaine. Sorry to interrupt, but it's just hilarious to me because I wouldn't want to be Tim Kaine right now, because you saw that terrible moment on Labor Day where he sees an old woman in distress, and I gotta help the old woman in distress, but he worries that if it's not that bad, he's gonna have a strip torn off him, right? How dare you? You made us look ridiculous, etc., etc. On the other hand, if it really is bad, you just sat there on your ass while an old lady was dying.
What the heck is the deal with Tim Kaine? That guy he looks so pervy. Number one, you look at the face, he looks like a complete pedophile. And number two, what the heck has he done to help this campaign? He doesn't seem to, is he making independent appearances? The press doesn't cover them. Does he say anything that's provocative enough to get noticed? Is he just a complete non-entity? Is it some sort of insurance policy for Hillary?
I think he's a hostage. I have never seen a vice presidential campaign like this. The vice presidential candidate is supposed to be the second-tier candidate. You're going to send him to the places that you don't want to ignore, but you don't want to bring out the big gun, right? If he is bolted to Hillary's side, what good is he?
But why? Why are they doing that? Why would they leave him in that spot? I mean, he's supposed to be the attack
because
dog.
Because of fear that they're not going to be able to electroshock her into sentience.
So he has to come out and perform. And again, he's not an electrified speaker. He's not an attractive man. His family's not attractive. He doesn't have much in the way of a background. It's sort of a bog standard leftist, the leftist version of the cuck. He goes to a black Catholic church.
No. I mean, it's worse than that. As far as I can tell, he didn't set foot in the state of Virginia until he was 26 years old.
Nice.
And he seems to have chosen Virginia, and Richmond, Virginia in particular, as being the best places to jumpstart his political career.
Yeah.
Because the idea being that, well, Richmond's going to have a white mayor eventually, and it's going to be me.
Right.
I mean, there is, we'll put this up on the website, but Hillary retweeted a Tim Kaine tweet, and it's about mental health. And Tim Kaine was governor of Virginia when the Virginia Tech massacre occurred, and I guess this makes him an expert in mental health and its treatment. But they show these children the backs of their heads, right? And there's this creepy figure to the right, and you get the impression that these children have been so traumatized that we can't show their faces, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, who's this creepy person with this variegated skin, this terrible skin? And I look a little closer. Oh, shit, that's Tim Kaine? He really Because when they started this joke about, him being the creepy clown who's terrifying America, I thought, yeah, it's a bit much. And then I saw this tweet and I thought, no, it's not a bit much.
Yeah.
It's exactly to the point.
That's the other thing that's been, that supposedly for such a young, they're supposedly appealing to all the young folk. The social media campaign run by Hillary and her surrogates has just been awful. I mean, they hit the wrong note every time. It takes them days to produce a response on social media to any sort of event. And then every sort of tagline they put out, like, imagine Donald Trump in the White House. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm imagining Donald Trump in the White House. I'm liking it. Every time they do that, it's so wrong-footed that you're just wondering, what the heck happened to this Clinton media magic?
Well, I mean, last night she was carrying on about this business of Trump is going to start attacking places because he's triggered by a tweet, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, first of all, it was your husband who blew up a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan because of Monica Lewinsky. And second, it was not that long ago that you freaked out on Twitter at Donald Trump, delete your account. I mean, well, what you're doing is just reprehensible.
Right.
It just cannot be allowed. And she runs these pictures, these stark, high contrast, black and white pictures of her. It's like, yes, it's all about strength. It's all about having your feet on the ground. It's all about being engaged in the moment when the tough decisions. And I'm thinking, you got to stop doing this because you're reminding people of Benghazi when 4 brave Americans were condemned to death by you, and then you blamed a YouTube video for it.
Right.
I mean, I have to say that I am shocked that Americans have let Hillary Clinton get away with Benghazi, because Carter was much less at fault for the Iran hostage situation, and he was crucified for that, and Hillary has pretty much skated for Benghazi.
Well, I mean, you're talking about practically two different nations. I mean, America in 1979 or 78, well, I guess 78. America at that point was an 85% white nation. Fast forward 30, 40 years and we're, 65% or whatever. So right off the bat, there's a big demographic difference. And you've got 35, 40 years of primary and secondary school indoctrination that's gotten worse and worse as you've gone forward, and a press that's moved from a press that at least had some remnants of those old guys who came up through the apprenticeship. It's been largely replaced by this press that now the credentials to be a reporter are, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and then a Columbia J School degree. That's if you want to talk about the biggest difference in the press, the biggest change in the press. All these old reporters and editors came up the hard way. They started as copy boys or as stringers at 18 or 19 and went through the school of hard knocks and had to file every night on the police beat or whatever. And eventually they had a skepticism of power. They may have been kind of reprehensible characters themselves, but they had no illusions about politicians and what they wanted to do. And now you've got your political class and your media class drawn from the same exact Acela Ivy League universities. They're all intermarried. They're all mostly Jewish or married to Jews or, second cousins with Jews. And that's what you got.
Well, I'm looking at a Hillary tweet where she is holding hands with an old black woman who is wearing, I can barely describe this hat. This hat is really a marvel that she's wearing. And Hillary has written, actually, it's not one of the Hillary tweets because it doesn't have an H after it, but it reads, do all you can for all the people you can in all the ways you can for as long as you can. And I'm thinking this whole Francis of Assisi thing, that's what she's running on now?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't. On the one hand, oh yeah, this is all about competence, and I'm the competent candidate and all that. But her social media is like she care message. I care,
Yeah,
and
they just can't
I
handle
frankly,
it.
sorry to interrupt. I was going to say,
sorry.
Frankly, I don't really care if you care. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I think that this all, I'm going to show you that I'm going to weep in public or whatever. I don't really want to see it. Other people like it. I don't. I just want to know that, you're good at the job, or you could be good at the job. And I don't know, you're not a crook, or you're not an idiot who wants to blow up the world. As I say, her posing as Francis of Assisi or whoever, it's, besides being revolting, it's positively bizarre.
Here's one of the strangest things about our first, future woman president. She has the least positive feminine attributes. You can think about, okay, well, maybe a woman would bring a sort of different view to a job that's so large. I don't necessarily believe that. But at least choose a woman who has some of the feminine attributes. Hillary shows none of the compassion we associate with women. She shows none of the sort of kindness that we would associate with it. Instead, she's sort of a caricature of the worst sort of male qualities. Aggressive in this horrible way, vindictive. It's as if we'd chosen the least womanly woman to be the first woman.
If a man had cackled about Gaddafi's murder the way she did, we would have assumed that he was evil and or mad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are models of female leadership. I mean, you can say what you will about Margaret Thatcher, but she was feminine. She was steely, she was tough, but there was that other side to it. We got the sense that, she was a decent wife, perhaps, and a decent mother. Whereas with Hillary, you get the sense that she's the opposite of a decent wife. And as a mother,
what she is a fag hag.
Yeah,
and there's
a
test.
Yeah.
And I'll let our listeners know, and I'm going to let them in on a secret. Here's the test. Imagine the woman in question, and she's seated on a chair, and a child is produced, and the idea that she is going to dandle this child on her knee. Now, if you're comfortable with that image, and you think that she would be comfortable with that image, instead of going, ooh, get this thing off me. Do you know how much this outfit costs? Right? Because that's what, try to imagine Hillary Clinton, acting and looking natural. Well, a child is acting like a child would, sitting on her knee. It doesn't work, does it?
No, she's not. She's not feminine. And again, I mean, there may be, a case to be made that, she shouldn't be necessarily so feminine, but she shows none of the positive qualities of a woman.
Okay, so let's have your prediction for the election, popular vote and electoral votes.
That's a tough one. I actually think that, one of my predictions from July of last year, was that Trump would actually win a substantial percentage of the black vote. And for a while this summer, I thought, man, I really missed that. But now I'm seeing that come back. And as I see the black vote come back, if he can get up around 20%, which I think is possible, maybe more in the black vote, then I think his popular vote will be pretty good. I think he's going to be around 52, 53%. And I think that for the states, I think the way things are going, he's going to carry most of the Rust Belt. He'll probably carry, I think, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. He'll get Florida, North Carolina. Of course, all the South will be solid Trump. And then I think he'll probably get Virginia. So I don't have an exact firm number, but I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him around 310 in the Electoral College. I think once Ohio flips, he'll take most of the Rust Belt with him. And those are really close. I mean, if you look at the polls right now, he's polled really close in places that Republicans haven't done well in recently. And so, yeah, I think he'll actually be, plus 300.
I just this idea of the red and the blue states, I think that this is going to be destroyed by this election. Yeah. I think it's going to be an election like 1984 when Reagan came within 2,000 votes of winning Minnesota.
Right.
I think it's going to be like that. One final question. We haven't really talked about the alt-right much, partly because I'm sick of talking about it. Yeah. Because I don't properly even know what it means, frankly. And I don't know that I want it to mean anything specific. But does this idea of entryism into the alt-right concern you?
A little bit. I mean, I think that one thing that has to define the alt-right is you have to kind of be aware on the JQ, on the Jewish question. I mean, I think I posted something recently that said, I'm kind of a sorrowful racist and a sorrowful anti-Semite. I didn't, I don't want to believe these things. I don't want to be this way. I prefer to go back to the way I felt in 1990, where, oh yeah, the natural, we just have to convince them with our arguments. But I think pretty clear with the Trump campaign and with the way the media's gone that, I think that entryism is a problem. I think you have to be aware of that. At the same time, what is the alt-right? It's just this giant melange of people who are kind of moving in the general same direction, from esoteric Harambists and Nazis to, as I described, MPC, a bunch of conservadads gone bad. It's kind of an odd alliance.
Well, no, I brought this up with Jared Taylor when I spoke to him, that I was quite interested in the fact that in the Brexit vote, Jews voted 54% for leave, which is 2 points higher than the 52% who voted overall to leave.
Yeah, I saw that. That's fascinating to me. I have this theory. If you go back and you read a lot of stuff in the 1920s and 30s, and you read that a lot of Jews are really insistent on becoming Americans. There is the whole communist element of Eastern European Jews, but at the same time, there's this older element of German Jews who feel pretty darn American, who are insistent on being American, who've, taken Judaism to essentially kind of Protestant Reform Judaism. And then I think what happens after World War II is the foundation of Israel kind of throws that all into chaos. That what had been a Jewish population that was moving towards assimilation or Americanism gets thrown to sort of divided loyalties. And once Israel's there, at that point, American Jews are no longer so American. And so I think that's the historic dynamic that's kind of been playing out in the last 60 or 70 years.
Well, what the Brexit vote suggested to me was the terrorist assaults on British soil. And not just that, but the endless exposés that, Britain was full of all of these one-armed imams who made it clear that they would gleefully slit every Jewish throat they could get their hands on, that Britain's Jews had considered this and decided, we want to be on the other side of that. And I'm getting no indication that, that we're getting a similar thing in the United States.
So you think that the more conservative Jews are moving towards something like the alt-right in America?
Well, no, I would have thought that you see so many people who really should know better. Oh, well, what Islam needs is a reform movement. Yeah, you don't know what reform means. Reform means to go back to the basics. And the basics of Islam are well known, and they're not liberal. Yeah. So this is the reform movement. The jihad, the terror, America and Israel being the great Satan, etc. Yeah. That's the true stuff.
Yeah, I actually read pretty good Arabic, so it's kind of a weird thing. But I think you're exactly right. That is the real Islam is the ISIS Islam. I think that's most Muslims in America feel that pull, and even if you deny it, even if you're happy, the fundamentalism in Islam leads towards ISIS. It leads towards something like ISIS. The American Christian becomes fundamentalist, and they just want to, go down the street and knock on doors and hand out tracts, or maybe adopt a black baby. I don't know. Christian fundamentalism is not exactly the same level of threat. The Catholic becomes a fundamentalist, and they become a lay brother or whatever. The Muslim becomes a fundamentalist, and you blow yourself up. It's really a stark difference, and everything that you would read and everything points exactly towards that. So Muslims who are saying, fundamentalism, this belief doesn't represent Islam, they're just wrong. And these teenage boys, 18, 19, who've gone off and lived this, American-style life of sin, the call is always there. The fundamentalist is back towards jihad, back towards that. So yeah, you're exactly right. I don't really know why Canadian Jews and American Jews aren't like British Jews. I'm not really full up on the dynamic with British Jews, why they're, more militantly conservative. Maybe, as you say, it's that they're closer to the destruction, closer to the danger. I don't get any sense that American Jews feel particularly endangered by American Muslims.
Well, the fair a fair number of them came as refugees from Nazi Germany. So, I mean, they're that much closer to the real-world effects of extremism, you know, that obviously when one lives in North America, it's very easy to be blasé about things that happen in the rest of the world. And it's actually, it occurs to me, of course, which is obvious, that, yeah, and it should follow that why do you want to bring in this rubbish from the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world isn't a threat to us, but you want to create a threat? Like, why would you do that? You'd have to be, like, crazy or evil to do that. But that's what our immigration policy is based on, which leads me to the very last thing, going back to the beginning of the interview. When Trump gets elected, starts building the wall, how much of California is going to self-deport, and how do you think that's going to transform California?
Oh, I think, I don't know how much of, I think there'll be a lot of self-deportation. I mean, I've been on record as saying that, Trump's deportation force will be, a half dozen guys running around looking at employers. I mean, we have all the laws on record to solve everything we need. You go after employers, you go after HR ladies and CEOs, you toss them in jail, and then you start working down the labor contractors that act as the cutout for big companies to hire illegals to polish their floors and, do their landscaping. So once you get total E-Verify and once you crack down on people hiring illegals, then you go after sanctuary cities, which you can do in an afternoon with executive orders. You just say, look, no federal funds for anybody that has a sanctuary city. And at that point, they're hopping on tops of trains and riding to the Mexican border to get back across. There still be, however many left, but it's nothing like what's there. And I suspect that Trump will probably do this in a kind of slow rolling way that will go towards the wall and then, get out the criminal aliens and then go down the list. So I suspect that, you could probably lose. I think they say that 5% of the American workforce is illegal. So total to the, what was the stat I saw? Total to the total working population of North and South Carolina. So if this goes through, right, you're going to see a couple of big economic movements. One is wages at the bottom will go up pretty sharply. There'll be probably something like a small recession with regard to small businesses going out of business, and rents will probably drop in a lot of these cities. So in California, I have no idea how far this will go, but it could be quite dramatic. And it won't involve, jackbooted thugs knocking on, as much as we might enjoy that, jackbooted thugs knocking on doors and hauling people off, in buses. It's going to
the media will find, I believe, that overselling Trump as the next Hitler is going to, when Trump wins, they will be doing his work for him, because so many of these people will be so terrified of the monster Trump that they will just bug out without even waiting for him to do anything.
I think that's very smart. I think that's exactly right. That, Trump's relying on sort of the rhetoric to do a lot of the work for him. He'll beef up ICE, and, I suspect we'll see a few ICE raids. But you're probably going to see ICE raids on employers more than you'll see them on, people's houses. The laws are there. You don't need to pass a lot more laws to take care of this problem.
And on that happy note, thank you so much, J5.
Thank you, Kevin.
That concludes episode 53 of Grace and Steele. I'd like to thank the alt-right supporter, Rival Thoughts, that's his Twitter handle, for providing this week's theme music. He's the same musician, composer, producer who provided last week's theme. Rival Thoughts is offering his musical services to all alt-right podcasters who are looking for original theme music. He can provide you with one of his, or he can help you with your own. We'll let his Pink Floyd-inspired guitar piece play us out. I'm Kevin Steele, and on behalf of my co-host, Kevin Michael Grace, thanks again to our generous donors, and to those who have yet to give at twokevins.com, thanking you in advance for keeping this podcast alive.